होम्योपैथिक एकेडमी इंडिया में आपका स्वागत है। मैं हूं डॉक्टर आर्य। हैनीमैन की लाइफ और उनके वर्क की श्रृंखला को आइए आगे बढ़ाएं। इन दिस वीडियो वी शैल टॉक अबाउट और वी शैल लर्न exhumation of Hahnemann's body and reburial in Père-Lachaise, Paris. The mind, once so tireless, the man who had been so restlessly active, had at length found the peace which he had longed for so much. The quiet of number 1252, First District, 1843, C. 324, in the cemetery of Materia Hill, Paris, France. He was not to be allowed to rest there. More than 50 years later, the coffin was moved again, Père-Lachaise, Paris, until at last the place was reached where the dead man probably remained forever in the cemetery of Père-Lachaise, Paris in 1898. Hahnemann's grave in Montmartre had been neglected and forgotten. There was no longer any relatives of Hahnemann or of his second wife in Paris who could have tended the grave. Mélanie's grave along was kept in good condition by her foster daughter's order and decorated on anniversaries. The French homeopathic physician did not trouble themselves about the resting place of the German discoverer of homeopathy. It is said there were homeopaths in Paris who did not even know where Hahnemann had died or where he was buried, and even looked for his place and kept it decorated. The credit may go to them, for they did not lose the last trace which would enable them to find the forgotten grave. That is the only credit they can get. In the year 1892, Dr. Wilmot Schaube's homeopathic calendar published an exact description of the place and situation of the grave in Montmartre. The article contained a photograph of a sketch drawn by Hahnemann's grandson, Dr. Sus Hahnemann. This brief note in Schaube's was the only effort on the part of Germans to keep alive the memory of the great master's grave. Probably even this passed unnoticed by most of homeopathic physicians of Germany, for nothing was done to maintain this semi-dissolute grave either by them or by Hahnemann's own grandson and family. The family's excuse was that his grandfather's widow had claimed the grave as her property and had decidedly objected to any interference by a third party. Thus, it came to be really merit of American homeopathic physician to find out Hahnemann's almost forgotten grave and to open this sarcophagus so that the last remains be interned in more fitting surrounding and their final resting be marked for all time be a memorial stone. Dr. Thomas Lindsay Bradford of Philadelphia took steps in the early part of 1896 to ascertain the burial place of the founder of homeopathy. Dr. Richard Hale, who was then a student at the Hahnemann College in Philadelphia, was close to Dr. Bradford, brought to the knowledge of later about Dr. Schaube's homeopathic calendar article about the location of this grave. Professor Dr. Platt of Chemistry Department of Hahnemann College, Philadelphia, a friend of Dr. Bradford, was requested to search for the Hahnemann's grave in Paris, who was to visit Europe along with his wife. Dr. Platt informed Dr. Bradford in detail location and its present state vividly in his letter to him. Unfortunately, he could neither take a photograph or make a sketch as it was prohibited, and he had to destroy it on the spot as he was threatened with imprisonment. An interesting fact, an action on it saved the master's remains from oblivion. He informed that the grave had taken more space than its sanctioned area, and a fine of 110 francs had been levied by the Paris city authority. And since nobody had come forward to deposit the same, and the order had been passed to dig up it shortly. He, however, was able to convince the authorities to postpone it as he had to obtaining the necessary amount from North America. Here was an opportunity to save the master's grave by spending 220 francs towards the fine and its repair, and in addition 30 francs annually as its rental. The matter was set in motion. Dr. Platt's report was submitted to the authorities, who immediately sanctioned the amount to Dr. Platt with a note that he should make it sure that the grave number 8 definitely contains the remains of the master. After ascertaining from Dr. Sus Hahnemann of through another friend, Dr. Durden, Dr. Sus Hahnemann confirmed the identity by giving a detailed description of it. On the 11th of June in the year 1896, after payment by Professor Platt on the charges, Hahnemann's grave with his remains was registered as property of Hahnemannian Homeopathic College, Philadelphia, America. After that, Professor Platt had the grave put in order. This decided move of the American homeopath was of course humiliating to the Parisian and other French homeopaths, and finally French homeopaths woke up. They now wished to do their share, and at the International Congress of Homeopathy in London in the year 1896, they raised the question of a monument to be erected above the newly restored grave. But it was soon shown that the site of the grave in Montmartre, near to the uninteresting old high wall of the cemetery, and its whole environment was not favorable to the erection of a lasting monument. The suggestion was then made of transferring Hahnemann's remains from the grave in Montmartre to the best known and most beautiful cemetery in Paris, Père Lachaise, the resting place of so many famous men, and to let them remain there permanently. After nearly 2 years, the necessary preliminaries were completed. In the afternoon of the 24th of May, 1898, it was possible for exhumation of the body and its transference from Montmartre to Père Lachaise to take place. 35 persons, that is far more in number than at the first burial of Hahnemann, had gathered round the grave known as the Hahnemann's grave on Tuesday morning at 8:30 am. Among them were present Hahnemann's grandson from England, the only living eyewitness of the ceremony 55 years before, M. Kulmani, M. Clocumin, Vice President of the Transatlantic Company, who represented Madame Melanie's foster daughter. The committee for the erection of monument was represented by 2 members, Dr. Richard Hughes of Brighton, England, and Dr. Francois Cartier, the Secretary of the Paris Homeopathic Committee. Dr. Simon, the Chairman of the French Homeopathic Society. In addition, there were 25 homeopathic physicians and apothecaries of France, among them being one with the German name Hermann, who had been living in Paris for a long time as a physician, and two physicians from Chicago, America. Finally, Dr. Canal, who had assisted his father to embalm Hahnemann, also five layman patients. At the beginning of the ceremony, Dr. Cartier of Paris delivered a speech in which he demonstrated the fact that the grave around which they were assembled must be Hahnemann's. Dr. Simon, the chairman of the French Homoeopathic Society, and Dr. Richard Hughes also gave their speeches. An original report of the opening of grave was published in the Society Homoeopathic, vividly giving the proceeding. In the presence of police commissioners, after the speeches, workmen commenced the lifting of the coffin out of the vault. Because of seepage of water, the body was decomposed very bad. Although it was impossible to recognize Hahnemann's feature, Dr. Ganel fortunately was able to withdraw from the coffin number of objects which guaranteed the authenticity of the body. What astonished particularly those present was the smallness of Hahnemann's stature, and asked those who had known Hahnemann and came to know that the founder of homeopathy was indeed a small man in height. The coffins of Hahnemann and his widow were laid on hearse, and 10 persons accompanied in the procession to the Père Lachaise cemetery. Among them being Dr. Sus Hahnemann, Mr. Cleuman, Dr. Richard Hughes, and the three representatives of the French homeopaths, Dr. Simon, Dr. Herman, and Dr. Cartier. The body was deposited in the vault made of cement, situated on Calment de Dragon, the main avenue of the cemetery. His widow's remains were placed in a small coffin at his feet. Then the vault was walled up with cement and concrete in the presence of the witness mentioned earlier. A simple iron railing with a festoon surrounded the grave for the time. 2 years later, however, on the 21st of July 1900, a fitting monument was erected and consecrated on the grave at the instigation of the International Homoeopathic Congress. At this ceremony, representatives from France, Germany, Belgium, England, Italy, Russia, Spain, USA, and Brazil, etc. were present. The chairman of the International Congress, Dr. Brazel of Petersburg, delivered his speech of consecration, and Dr. L. Simon, on behalf of the French homeopaths, undertook to preserve the grave. The monument is simple, beautifully polished by the finest Scottish granite, dignified and durable. In the middle, it is adorned with Hahnemann's bust, a facsimile of David's talented work, with his inscription on the granite, Hahnemann, founder of homeopathy, and underneath the dates of his birth and death. Two tablets to the right and left of the plinth contains inscription. On the left, his basic writings are cited, that is Organon, Materia Medica Pura, and chronic diseases. On the right side, the main thesis of homeopathy, the law of similar, is recorded. On the plinth, one may read that the memorial was set up by an international subscription. 20,000 francs were collected for it. Hahnemann's grave is now included in the dignified and sacred abode of great men, set apart by France for all time. Over them, Bartholomew's deeply moving masterpiece, The Triumph of Death, stands enthroned, dedicated to all the dead, and which was consecrated again 6 months later on All Souls Day in 1899. The German master of therapy lies in Paris cemetery in the midst of France's famous dead as one who worked, investigated, and fought in the service of good of all mankind. Dr. Richard Hughes' words, at the sight of this monument, the world will ask, what kind of man was this, to whom, after more than 50 years, his followers have shown so much honor, and those who already know of him will make their pilgrimage to the spot from all the countries of Europe, North and South America, India and Australia, and will rejoice to see their master so honored. They will depart again with fresh courage to follow the way he opened for the furtherance of his art and for the well-being of all his. What is justifiable pride and yet noble humility, Hahnemann desired to be the inscription of his final resting place on earth, non intulis vixi. I have not lived in vain. Yet, Horace's words are surely true of him. Egiti monumentum eri perinus, that is, I have set up a monument for myself more lasting than brass. Lastly, let me quote Dr. Samuel, and I quote, in my lifetime, I desire no recognition for the beneficent truth which I have selflessly propagated. What I have done for the world, I did from higher motive, non intulis vixi, Samuel Hahnemann. However valuable, effective are the monuments and writings of the dead masters, most valuable and most effective is the propagation of his teaching and ideas by the work of his successors and followers, and by the combined jealous work of those who have realized the intransient truth and beneficence of Hahnemann's reforms. Practitioners of homeopathy and laymen benefited from this science all over the world are the most true propagators of Hahnemann's life work.